I think we're on. We're going. How are you going, everyone? Welcome to another live grain and grape brewing demonstration. My name is Joel, and today, as part of Ben's style school, we have the titular Ben. He's very
Lambic.
He's very titular, doing a Lambic.
I'm quite titular. I've always said that about me.
And a glutton for punishment too.
Yeah, apparently. So it's going to be a pretty hectic day today, guys. We've got a lot to get through, so I'm not going to be messing around.
Yeah. So perhaps
excuse the cough as well. I got COVID tested last week. I'm all good. I am asthmatic though, so the cough tends to stick around after I come back from a cold.
Asthma plus cold equals no fun. So yeah, we've got a lot to cover today. Turbid mashing, a lot of history, I assume. If there'll
be a little bit of history if I can squeeze it in, but it's definitely going to be a very practical stream today.
Cool. So you're going to learn some interesting stuff about turbid mashing.
This might be the one. This might be the one, like I've been saying since I started doing demos, in person or stream, that I want things to go wrong, because you don't really learn how to brew until you learn what to do when things go wrong.
Absolutely.
Shaping up very much to be the one where it might happen. So
this is your first one, isn't it, too?
Real sort of prestige TV.
Absolutely. Cool, and yeah, so given that we're going to be whipping through at a rapid pace, we may not be able to answer all your questions, but by all means post them anyway, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
We'll do our best.
There will be chunks of time where there's not much happening, so I definitely will be addressing stuff in those chunks. And I do have to describe what the heck I'm doing as well though. So
sure, yeah, there'll be a lot of that going on. But if, as always, the community out there, if you want to help a home brewer out, you see a question, feel free to chime in and answer as well. So yeah, I'm going to get out the way, and
let's get straight to it.
We will jump in.
So I have kind of jumped ahead a little bit of the stream, just so I'm not still here at sort of 6 o'clock tonight. So what I've done basically so far is I have moistened the grains. The grist ratio for a traditional turbid mash for the initial dough in is about 600 mils of water for every kilo of grain. Now, considering the sort of generally agreed upon absorption rate is 1 litre per kilo, where you're probably understanding that when I say moisten the grains, I mean moisten the grains.
It's lightly.
The biggest mash I've seen in my life. So I did that. I calculated all my strike temps and everything. So I put in 3 litres of 62-degree water into my 4.68 kilos, I think, of grain. And then that hit me right on 48 degrees for a beta glucan rest, which I held for 20 minutes. I've then added some nearly boiling water. I've got Braumeister going in the background. This is going to be the saviour of the day, as always. Spiedel coming through in a pinch. So I've got 90-degree water in this urn. I added about 3-ish, 2 to 3 litres of that in here to bring it up to a protein rest of 58 degrees. And that's where we are now. We're caught up. The reason I've done all that, I will go into in a second, but first I want to see if I can actually get any liquid out of this and get the turbid mash part of things going, and then I'll describe why I'm doing all this crazy, silly things. Why you're doing what you're doing. Yes, yep. There's a lot of steps to the turbid mash. It's anyone who's familiar with decoction, it's sort of, a similar sort of thing, but different. It's like a wacky Belgian decoction.
Yeah.
They put mayo on their chips and they put turbid in their mash. Oh man, this is milky. So I'm trying to get about 1 litre out of this if I can. So fingers crossed. And because it's only at about 58 degrees, I'm not using gloves at this stage. For the second attempt at pulling water out of this, I will be using gloves because I'll be dealing with a much hotter liquid. And you should always try to not burn yourself if possible when brewing.
So you've got a little camp stove set up there for your boiling.
Oh! 1 litre.
No, really?
Nailed it. Things are going according to plan. Who would have thought, guys? So I'm going to bring this, I got a little bit of milkiness onto the camping stove, but that's all right. So I'm turning this on. So over the course of the mash, I'm going to keep adding to this pot. I might even pull this across quickly to give you guys a look at it. This is...
It's turbid.
Yeah, turbid is the right word.
Let's see, sorry, focus.
So this is like a milky, starchy...
Yeah.
Like this would be delicious base for a good pasta sauce. All that yummy starch. So I'm going to keep adding to this. There'll be one more pull off over the course of this brew, which should result in roughly 4 or 5 litres in there. And I'm going to try to keep that at 83 degrees. This is a very specific number. These are the numbers I pulled up on all my research in the last, the week preceding the last week, before I had to call in sick on the brew day. And the reason for that is we don't want any further enzymatic activity happening. We don't want this to convert any further. We want to keep this starchy and milky and unfermentable to yeast, but not to other things. So I am going to add in, let me grab my numbers, about 2 litres. Oh boy. I'm going to add in about 2 litres of this nearly boiling water into my mash. And that should bring me up to around 66 degrees. If it doesn't, I'll add more until I hit it. But my calculations, which I did using maths, or more specifically using an online calculator, so I didn't have to try to figure out thermodynamics because it was year 11 physics. Thermodynamics was my weakest sort of subject in year 11 physics.
So people may be gathering there's a fair amount of, there's some calculating and a little bit of maths you need to do in preparing for making or doing a turbid mash, making a lambic. I'm sure Ben will cover all that in a bit. But yeah, there's online calculators and things you can use to help you out, so you don't have to do it completely manually.
You basically want to figure out if I have a mash that's got this much grain in it at this temperature, and I add X amount of 90 degree water into it, what temperature will it come to? And then when you figure out how to get to the temperature you want to know, then you know how much roughly to add. That was a really bad way of putting that. I promise you, in a few seconds, my brain will slow down and I'll be able to talk legibly. So we're shooting for 65, 66. It is rocketing up past 50. Slowing down at 55. 57, 58. 59. So we're at about 60 degrees. So I'll have to add a little bit more water in. I don't know how much water in, but at least we're in the 60s. So we're definitely getting...
We're in saccharification range.
Definitely getting some conversion. Oh, 61, 62. Oh, it's still climbing. 63. We're at 63 degrees, so that's good. I'm going to add a little bit more. I want to get up to 65. Because even 66 would be good. And I don't think I'm going to need much to do it because I'm already sort of around 63. The reason why I want to hit that number specifically is that I want to get as much sort of good stuff going on now as possible, but also I'm working with a plastic bucket, so I'm going to lose temperature over the course of this rest. And if I go a little bit higher to start with, it's probably going to be better
So yeah, you're better off over, getting a bit hotter than not hot enough, because it will cool down a bit between the water steps.
Yep. So I'm going to call that. I hardly put any of that boiling water in, just enough to sort of get me there. But I want to check the temperature of this because I don't want to overshoot. Which I have. This is going to be hectic.
It's kind of how it goes, really, isn't it?
So I think it'll be all right.
Yep.
I'm sitting on about 90 degrees. I wanted to sit on about 83.
You kind of just have to roll with it, don't you? Depending on your equipment at hand. Craig is asking a question. So if you're under temp, do you add more 90-degree water, or do you just?
Yeah. So you're better off being conservative in your addition, because then you can add little bits of more water to hit your number.
Right.
So like when I said I want to be over temp, I don't want to be like
Way over.
3 degrees over temp. I want to be like maybe 1 degree over, so that it'll come back down. So that's sitting at about 93, so I'm about 10 degrees over. I could sort of sense it boiling
Yeah.
off to the side, but that's okay. We don't want the enzymes moving anyway. And we do actually want to get some tannins counterintuitively out of the grains today.
Yes, this is a type of beer where you want tannins as opposed to
boiling it, not so bad. Not so bad. But I'm going to try to keep an eye on that as the day goes on and keep it at 83 degrees. And feel free to remind me in chat to check it if I haven't checked it in a while as well, because there'll be a lot going on. But let's get to why I'm doing this crazy, ridiculous mashing regime. Basically, with a lambic, we are wanting to get a wort which is fermentable, but also unfermentable. We're going to be pitching a mixed culture of different bacteria, wild yeasts, funky things into there. And the thing about brewer's yeast is it works quite quickly and can outcompete other stuff. So if we throw this mixed culture into a standard wort full of sugar, the yeast will chew up most of the food in there, and there's not going to be much left for the wild and funky and crazy things to get hoed into, which is going to be where so much of the flavour and complexity comes from. By brewing in this way, and kind of basically breaking 90% of the rules that we all kind of know as brewers, we're providing, I guess, a mixture of food, some that the yeast will eat and some that it won't be able to, so that all those different cultures can get a fair share and contribute what they're going to contribute to the overall flavour of the beer. This is why we're doing this. Doesn't explain why there's so much grain and so little water, which I will get to in a little bit as well. But Joel was pretty much bang on when he said it's really similar to a decoction. I forgot to check my timer actually. It was about 9:30 that we pulled it off. So let's call it 9:40
yes. 9:30,
for this one. It's been about 4 minutes since I jumped across to that. So we'll say 9:40, so at 10:10 we will move on to the next step. I'll just set an alarm now.
I'll try and remember, which is not saying much.
Like I said, it's going to be an action-packed day today. Where are we? 10:10. 10.
So your turbid mash, you say it is a complicated process, I suppose. It's a long process, so you'll be setting timers, making sure you hit your marks, hit your volumes, all that.
Yeah. So the reason why we've got let's start with what a grist is for a lambic. That's probably as good a place as any to start, because that's going to explain why we're doing some of the things we're doing as well, to a point. So lambics are made with around a 60-40 split of European Pilsner malt and unmalted wheat. So the unmalted part is why we're having to do these extra steps. So why we had to do a 45 degree and a 58 degree step. Because those grains haven't gone through any kind of modification process. So we had to break down the hemicellulose structure of the grain. Don't ask me what that means. I just know that because I read it. But basically, beta glucanase is active at that initial sort of moistening temperature, and that's going to break down the hemicellulose structure of the grain, which basically sort of it's protection against being dissolved and turned into something we can work with for beer.
Okay.
And we don't want that. So that initial rest is going to break that down. The protein rest is going to break down a lot of the glutens and a lot of the other things in the grain, so that into amino acids and useful little things. And right now we've jumped up to 65, 66 degrees, which most people watching should be familiar with, but just in case, with brewing beer, you've got malt, so barley that is being taken through a process to activate the enzymes in the barley. Barley stores its energy in the form of starch. Yeast can't eat starch, so we want to convert, in this case, some of it into sugar, so that the yeast can ferment it and turn that into delicious beer. There are certain temperatures at which those enzymes that we're trying to activate are kind of happiest, and the starch to sugar specific ones are around the 60 to 70 degree mark. So right now we're at 65, 66 degrees. So both enzymes are pretty happy in that range. It's probably more favouring one over the other, which tends to make really simple sugars, more fermentable sugars. When we go up to the next temperature step, that enzyme will be out of its kind of range. It'll sort of be at a point where it can't kind of do its thing. And that will favour the other one, which makes more complex, sort of longer chain sugars, which will add to body, mouthfeel, those kinds of things. Normally, in this case, we're going to be adding a bunch of different cultures and bacteria, like I said, that will be able to chew up those longer chain sugars and starches and things like that. So it will still result in quite a thin body on the beer, which if you guys have ever had a Lambic, you may not have had a straight Lambic, but probably a Gers, like Cantillon, Boone. Sorry, Booze.
Yep. Booze. It is Booze.
Leafman's. There's a bunch of really good ones. We've got a bunch of really good ones in the fridge at the moment as well.
If ever you want to have
if you want to try them.
You're well stocked.
But they're really complex and interesting beers.
They're very dry.
Really dry.
Yeah.
And a Gers is a blend generally of different Lambics sort of aged between 1 to 3 years. Sometimes they'll go a little bit older, particularly lately that's sort of been happening more and more. There's a general rule, Lambics are sort of barrel aged over the course of at least a year. And then once you've got sort of a mix of a few different ages, you can start to blend them back. So Lambic that's been in the barrel for 3 years, for 2 years, for 1 year. You make a mix of that, re-ferment, so like add some sugar, re-ferment it in the bottles to carbonate it, and then that's generally how Lambic is purchased and consumed by us. I'm not going to be doing that today because I can't.
We don't have
3 years into 24 hours. What I will be doing is making a wort, and I'll be sort of hopefully hitting the boil in a reasonable amount of time so that we can look at what happens with hops and things with this type of beer as well. And that will just be fermented. We sell a Y-Yeast Lambic blend, which is unofficially the Cantillon blend, and I'll be pitching that in there and putting it in a better bottle and forgetting about it for about 12 months is the plan.
Nice.
So why are we mashing so thick? Actually, do we have any questions? I'm rocketing through the info a lot faster than I thought I would be.
Okay. So, no, everyone is quiet at the moment, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. We are kind of
I'm just going to check this temperature again because the thing about only having a litre is it heats up and cools down very quickly. So
just to summarise quickly again what Ben was saying there, just for any absolute beginners out there, this is probably not a beginner beer, but there's a lot of concepts in here that you'll hopefully find interesting anyway, even if it's a bit beyond you. But so in the mash, temperature is important. At certain temperatures, certain enzymes are activated, and each enzyme kind of does a different thing. So at the very beginning of the mash, when Ben was just wetting the grain, this was off camera before we started, it was about 40 degrees thereabouts. In that range, the enzymes, they're not really doing any converting of starch to sugar at that point, but they are kind of eating through some of the longer chains, breaking them down. And then as you raise the temperature up, eventually, as you were saying before, he got up into the 60-degree range, and that is more typical between 60 to 70 degrees, where you would find a typical mash for, a quote-unquote, a normal beer. And in that range, the enzymes do start breaking those longer starch chains down into sugars that the yeast can consume. But as Ben was saying, of course, we don't want the yeast to consume everything, all the sugars that wind up in that wort, because then there'll be nothing left for the bugs. And bugs, when we say bugs, we mean bacteria, different kinds of bacterias, that will sour the beer and create other interesting complex flavours. Hence, sort of the boiling and the pulling off of the turbid part of the mash. What Ben's doing here in the pot, just stirring, this process basically makes this section of the wort unfermentable. So as you boil it, it kills off all the enzymes and sort of locks, I guess, the starch and stuff into place. So it leaves some technical word here, leaves some goodness behind for the bugs to eat, over that long kind of 12-month period that we were talking about. So yeah, that's sort of.
I'm going to have to keep even more regularly checking that, because it'll drop down from 93 to like 60. And if this is sitting at 60, what's going to happen is those enzymes that we were just talking about are going to keep chewing away at that starch and turning it into sugar, and that's not what we want. So we want to maintain this in the 80s pretty much for the whole process.
Got it.
And because there's only a litre in there, that's why it's cooling down so quickly.
Yeah,
so I'm really going to have to keep an eye on that. But also because it's only a litre in there, if I keep it on even on a low flame, it is going to boil. So,
yeah, you got to. It's this fine line. We do have a question that came through.
Excellent.
The unmalted wheat, did that get milled?
It did. Yes. So I actually. I've never brewed a Lambic before. This is my first time. So like I said before, if things go wrong, awesome. We can sort of troubleshoot together. But I was looking up a bunch of different recipes, and on Milk the Funk, I saw someone talking about using torrefied wheat, which is something that we do stock here. And I thought, oh yeah, that's unmalted. I'll use that. But we also stock raw unmalted wheat. So it would probably be more traditional just to use the raw unmalted wheat. But I went with the torrefied for some reason. It got in my head yesterday when I was weighing out the grain. I'm like, oh, torrefied wheat. Scooped it up, crushed it. It is what it is. But it should be functionally the same, because torrefied wheat is an unmalted wheat. It's just been gelatinized, so it helps to make it slightly more available for
a bit quicker
mashing and liquefying and all those sorts of things.
And it's been a while, but unmalted wheat is quite tough on your mill too. Just be aware if you're using one of those hand cranked jobs, prepare for a workout.
So maybe consider it. Maybe if you are doing a Lambic, maybe consider going with torrefied, because it is a lot softer and mill's a lot easier. And it will. I mean, realistically, you could probably use flaked wheat as well, but I haven't really heard of people doing that. So, but in terms of achieving the same thing, like it's still an unmalted form of wheat, and it's also been gelatinized, so it should dissolve nicely into your mash.
Mash, yep, cool.
which dissolving nicely when you're dealing with like such a small amount of water, probably not a bad thing.
Maybe, yeah. So yeah, don't be afraid to use slightly non-traditional ingredients like the more modern wheats that are available.
Shoot that fly away. But yeah, so, and again, I guess that there's lots of, wheat is a very glutinous grain, like a lot of protein in it. So that probably helps as well somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't know how,
sure.
but I'm sure it does.
Yeah, and I guess back to the grain bill, I mean, for all the complexity in process here, the recipe for the grains is really quite simple.
The recipe for everything is simple. Normally I come in here fairly early on a brew day and I'll weigh everything out, get it all ready, have it in the little cups good to go. I didn't have to do anything today.
Yeah,
so I just came in. I've literally just thrown some water and some grains together. And I've got a little bag over here which I'll pull out when we hit the boil, which shouldn't be, I think we're on track.
Good.
I think we're going pretty well. We might actually get this all done by 1 today, which is wild to me.
I believe in us.
I shouldn't have said that though, because we definitely won't. But yeah, I'm feeling good about today so far.
Yeah. So good. Yeah, and it is a fun like decoctions as well, and this sort of process. It's kind of one of those things. There's a challenge that as a brewer, I recommend everyone try it at least once. Even if it's your thing, of course.
You're connecting yourself to the history of the style, how it's been brewed, and how, in this case, it continues to be brewed. That's one thing with a lot of those Lambic breweries is they haven't really changed their processes. They're still doing things the same way. Even though scientifically they know certain practices aren't really contributing what they thought they were contributing, they still do it. Because they don't want to change any variables and accidentally stuff it up.
Yeah, there's the legend that Cantillon, when they renovated or did something to their brewery, but they didn't want to disturb the cobwebs in the ceiling of where the beer was fermented, because they were afraid that might affect the microbiome floating around in the air that gives the beers their unique flavour. So they left the cobwebs where they were.
It is funny though, like they still, I think it's Cantillon that does it, that like they still open up the vents and let the night air settle out over the wort. But it's been pretty well established now that it's the wood itself that they keeping the wort on that's probably inoculating.
Yep. And then the barrels, when they transfer, once the beer's had its primary fermentation, they'll transfer it to big barrels, and then it will continue on and have a secondary fermentation. Often they'll recycle and reuse those barrels, and those barrels contain bugs as well. And I guess through a process of elimination, not every barrel works out to plan. Like, they must get the occasional bad batch that just, tastes awful, and they'll dump it. That barrel doesn't get used again, and I guess through a process of natural selection, they wind up having an ecosystem of bacteria and wild yeasts that create the flavours they want.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So it has probably less to do with the cobwebs and the stuff floating around the air, but I'm sure that that's part of the romance, isn't it?
I feel like romance is important as well. Just using barrels is a romantic thing.
Yeah. And what was I going to say?
Sorry guys, I'm trying to, speaking of balance,
Just turning on the overhead camera.
Trying to get the flame just right so that it doesn't go out, but it also just gently heats this. We are sitting at about the right temperature now though, which is good. Just above 80. Cool. Just got a very gentle flame under there now, so hopefully that holds it and doesn't heat it too much, but yeah. Why are we, yeah. I'm trying to like hold myself back from going into the why are we using such a thick mash, because I feel like that's a good topic for when after we do the next little bit of activity, which should be pretty soon, I think. We're currently at 10 o'clock, so we're about 10 minutes away from moving to the next mash. And this is heating too much again, I think. See, most sane people will do their first turbid mash on their own when they can focus, not when they're
not
presenting to
live
to a bunch of people live on the internet. But I'm not most people.
There is a lot of plates to juggle.
Not a good.
The turbid part is yeah. So it's yeah.
We are good. I was worried about nothing. Holy dolly. So I may as well talk about what the plan is with the mash. So when this is finished, I'm supposed to pull off about close to 4 litres from there. 3.8 litres from that. I don't know how I'm going to manage that, but fingers crossed. Hopefully it works. That's going to go into that pot as well, and that's going to stay at that temperature. And then I'm going to put more water in here and bring that up to the final mash temperature of 72 degrees. Once that has finished, this goes back into this, along with a bunch of this. And that comes up to our sparging temperature of around just over 80 degrees. That's in a normal turbid mash. What I'm planning on doing is, because I've got a bag in here, a brew in a bag, and that's my main sort of filtration. Once I've finished that last mash, I'm going to take the bag, put it into here, and use that to rinse off the grains. And I've started at the start of today with the amount of water that I would need if I was doing a brew in a bag with this amount of grain.
Yep, so sort of working from the back, from the end backwards.
Yep, so I'm pulling from that to keep doing all these processes. So when that goes back in there, I should still have the right amount of water to get the gravity and all the things that I need sorted. So plan is, dunk the brew in a bag back in here, and I've just realised I've made one minor mistake in using the Braumeister because it does have the central tie rod.
You've got the tie rod, yeah.
So it may be tricky to get the bag in there, but I might be all right. We'll see how we go. Yeah. Another option could be if we put enough water in there to rinse it properly, squeeze it all out really well, and then just pour the bucket into here as well. That will work too. We've got options. But basically, I'm going to transfer all the liquid that I can muster from this, from this into the Braumeister, and then I can even recirculate. I can use this trivet, put that on top, have the bag on top of that, and get Joel to help me recirculate the liquid from the bottom up through the bag to get more liquid in there as well. And then that'll basically be my boil kettle.
And then from there on, it's pretty much a standard boil.
We can sort of move on to the boiling process, which is pretty much, so normally if I was doing a turbid mash, it would be a 2 to 3 hour boil, which sounds a bit wild. I think the reason for that is they want to hit the gravity concentration. So there's a lot of water going through, a lot of grain, a lot of rinsing, a lot of those sort of things happening. Another reason is they don't want any hop flavour, but that we will be using hops, which we'll be discussing a little bit later on. We're not using normal hops though. But they want to boil all the flavour out of those hops so that all they're contributing is their antimicrobial properties. And I guess there's also like a degree of like kettle caramelization and those sorts of things that occur as well, which adds complexity and again to some more interesting things for the bugs and stuff to chew on. I'm not going to do that though. I'm going to do a 1 hour boil today. But, you know, it's something to consider if you are going to have a crack at this at home, which I do recommend, because even though I seem really hectic, I'm genuinely having a really fun time. This is something I haven't done before, something I never thought I would do. I don't actually drink a lot of Lambic. As you guys probably know by now, I'm really into my clean beers, lagers, things like that. Lambic's kind of the opposite of that. It's not my favorite style. That said, a really good is really good. It is my wife's favourite style of beer though, so I've
got to say it's probably one of mine too.
Sorry, I needed this.
She's been hassling me to brew a Lambic for a long time. So I guess now I am doing that. Finally, after a decade odd of her hassling me to brew one, which is good, you know. It's our 10 years of me brewing anniversary beer. But yeah, I'm really pumped that I'm getting to do this, because it's something that's really kind of wild and crazy. And again, as we know, I'm a history nerd, and this is like a historical method of brewing beer. So it's tying yourself to that tradition and to those kind of methodologies. So where are we at?
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
10:10.
Oh, it's painful. Let's just say that we are at the right time,
Yeah,
because I don't think 4
it.
minutes is really going to make a difference. I'll change the alarm. Well, I'll turn the alarm off. How about that? Turn the alarm off. So let's see how we go at extracting liquid from this.
How large is it?
Oh, it's pretty much just solid. But there'll be goop in the bottom. Because another thing that happens, guys, as this mash chugs along, as those enzymes get to work on the stuff in there, it thins out whatever liquid is in there. And that's what's really gonna, I think, save us in terms of getting stuff out. Will it help us get 4 litres out? We'll find out, I guess.
Yeah, that's the suspense is killing me. I reckon you'll be fine.
I reckon we will too. Well, there's a lot that's coming out of here. And remember how I said I was going to use gloves and then I didn't? I'm going to pretend I'm a chef with the old asbestos hands.
Yes. I think I saw Heston Blumenthal pull an egg out of boiling water once with his bare hands.
It is funny though, my aforementioned wife always teases me about being a massive wuss with hot things in the kitchen. But you know what, she's an amazing cook and she does most of the cooking, so I'm definitely not as experienced as her when it comes to that sort of thing. But I am also a massive wuss. Generally speaking. But not when it comes to beer, because beer is something worth burning your hands over.
Yeah.
This isn't actually hurting me though, to be honest. It's hot, but it's not unbearably so. You know what, guys? I think we're definitely pretty close to 4 litres in there.
Yeah, I think if you, I mean, the calculations, challenging as they are, I think if you sort of hit them right, get them right.
This is going to get messy.
Yeah. Yeah, generally you'll be fine. So it sort of trust the maths kind of situation, but it is a bit of, it's always a nervous sort of.
What I might do is, can I get you in here?
Yes,
to give me a hand?
yep.
So if you can pour the bucket in, and then we'll see where it comes to. Hopefully up to
so you
the
got
5 litre
some
mark.
markings on there, so I can't really see where the markers are. I'll just pour it. You tell me when to stop.
Pour, 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 pour. Just keep pouring.
Yeah.
Pour it all in.
Yeah. Pour it in. Okay.
Oh, that's looking good. All right, let's get this back in.
Oh, yep. Yep. Got it.
I think we're good. I think we're good.
Yeah. It's cloudy. It's definitely cloudy.
Guys, this is really exciting. I was like so nervous that nothing was going to work out today, but everything so far, fingers crossed, touch wood, but everything so far has done exactly what my calculations told me it would.
I'll just zoom in here. You can kind of see how cloudy that is.
It's milk. It is seriously milk. All right, so I am to add 1.5 liters of this to get up to 72 degrees, supposedly. Let's see how that plays out. I may need to add more. But the internet told me, namely brewersfriend.com, with their amazing calculators, who we are not affiliated with, by the way. But if they want to sponsor these streams, or if they just want to sponsor me, like,
Just your life.
I send a lot of traffic to their website through the week.
Yeah, well, that
All right.
handy resource. So, and it's just water, of course, in the Brewmaster there.
Yep.
If anyone maybe missed that.
Just water. All right, that's 1.5 liters of 90-degree water going into some damp grains. Honestly, guys, if you showed me a bucket with grains that looked this dry and said I could pull 4 liters out of it, I would not believe you. This is making me question everything I thought I knew about, like, water calculations for brewing. This is incredible. All right. What temperature are we at? Put a little bit of heat in that. And you know what? Honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter, because that was the last pull-off that we're doing. So if I need to add an extra 5 liters of water in here to get up to temp, then
That's fine, because from this point on, so in the bucket there, you're pretty much aiming to hit mash out.
Yep, 72 degrees.
72, okay.
So
there you go.
second. The alpha amylase rest.
Yep.
We're shooting for.
And
So I'm on 60, so I'm going to need to add
mash
a
out.
fair bit
Yeah,
more.
sorry, yeah, 72.
So I'll add another 1.5.
But yeah, it's interesting. So when Ben emptied the bucket earlier, so you're pretty much getting rid of most of the available water in there, and you're starting again with the grain's wet, but an empty grain bed. So all the water you're putting back in now, you're topping that back up.
Yeah, I'm effectively replacing what was there before, which one of the sites I saw pretty much said, put in the amount that you take out.
Yep.
But then I saw another site that didn't say that, so
Okay.
I went with that one because they seemed to have more kind of measured and scientific justification for the things they were telling me to do. So I trusted that. And I say seems to have because I'm not a scientist, so I just go by what makes the most logical sense, or go by what has actually had logic applied to how they came to those conclusions. Just quickly check this as well. Again, you know what, it doesn't really matter. It's all coming to the boil soon anyway.
Oh, no, that's quite good. Yeah. It's just quite big for like a little bit. I'm gonna shoot stuff yet. your chair, this one. I like it. This one's more fun than fair enough.
Yeah, we're getting closer. We're up at about 68 now. So yeah, I think pretty much another half litre will get us there.
Yeah, one of the hobbits, the little people.
So this is looking way wetter now. And I think part of that is the grain's going to absorb its 1 litre a kilo. And then anything beyond that is just going to be extra liquid. So once we've kind of gone through that, I think that's how it's working. I'm telling myself that's how it's working. And I am going to keep checking this because I want to get it pretty close to right. If I overshoot by too much, I run the risk of denaturing the enzymes that I'm wanting to work in this rest. So if I do overshoot, I've got like a window of time. I can put a bit of cold water in there, knock it back down. But I do want to sort of be fairly confident that but this is the sloppiest this mash has been so far today. It almost looks like a real mash.
Good.
So now we're showing 66 degrees. This is the challenging part, I think. It's very unevenly heated. And I think the temperature at the bottom is probably where I want to be measuring it. But if I bury the thermometer in there, then it's going to give me a false reading because it's going to be expanding all the liquid all the way up the thermometer instead of just a little bit at the ball, which is where it's measured from. Yeah, I'm still going to need more. We're sitting just above 65, so I'll just keep adding more. Like I said, it doesn't matter at this point.
Yeah. So you're chasing temperature at this point as opposed to, you're not really worried about volume.
Yep.
It's more you just got to get that temperature.
We've got our murky, starchy goop over there. And honestly, if we're talking from that kind of historical mindset, if we look at something like a decoction, where they, like that developed before thermometers really. So you'd pull off a third, boil it, add it back in, that brings you to your next mash temp. So it makes sense if you pull off an amount of liquid and then add that amount of liquid back in. That's a logical way to develop a brewing, like a mashing style or a
without
mashing
any
regime.
measurement kind of device.
So that does make a bit of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think we've also proved today that you don't need a whole day if you...
I guess if you're committed and you can, yeah.
Because we tried to blow the fly away and then realised that I can't blow through a mask. That's definitely a 90. Yeah, it's a 90.
So decoction would have been around earlier than this, wouldn't it?
Much
Yes,
earlier,
much
yeah.
earlier. Yep.
I'm really struggling to get it up. We're at about 68 degrees still, which is where I measured earlier. I'm starting to have a lack of faith in the thermometer now. Literally all the sites were saying though, add water to get it to X temperature. So, yeah, I'll just add more. I'll just keep adding more. Meanwhile, this one over here is up. Yeah, flame's still on. What temp are we at now? Remembering as well that I'm starting to cook a little bit to the bottom of the pan. Yeah, this one's right where it's meant to be, in the 80s. That's good. So we're also going to count this rest from when we added the initial amount of water in too. So rather than once we hit the temp, because this has still been actively mashing this whole time. So don't start your timer from when you arrive at the temperature you're chasing. Start your timer from what? This bloody fly.
That fly is stubborn.
He really wants whatever's in here. Yeah, start your timer from when the mash starts, regardless of if it takes 10 minutes to hit your temp.
Okay. Good tip.
Because you're still mashing, like the enzymes are still active, like it's...
Yeah. So you would count this as the 72 degree, a part of the 72 degree range?
Yeah, because the enzyme that we're trying to activate is still active right now.
It's still active, exactly,
Yeah.
yep.
The active range is 65 to 75 for alpha amylase, so we've been over 65, it's happy.
So yeah.
It's chugging along. It's been chugging along through the first mash rest.
Just chugs along a bit faster.
Yeah.
When it gets into that optimal range.
It's the thing we all learn about chemistry. This is one of the few things I know about chemistry, is that temperature makes things faster. Add more degrees, add more quickness.
And more flies.
And this bloody fly, yeah. Go away. Just get lost.
Not having any of it.
Bloody hell. Take a hint, fly. You're not wanted here. I don't know. Let's just call it. It's not. I'm gonna grab another thermometer just to check. Don't always trust your equipment.
Yeah, I think the key is, I guess with a lot of this stuff, you don't need to be super precise. If you're close enough, often that's good enough. I thought Aussie's only brewed Coopers. I'll pass that on to Ben, he'll get a chuckle out of that. Yeah, so, I mean, if you have access to other measuring equipment just to be sure you're hitting your numbers on it. I remember that was something I always, when I brewed in a bag, I was always all over the place, and I think it was the thermometer, or sometimes you'll hit a hot pocket or a cold spot in the mash, you've got to stir it.
Really what you do in 10 minutes.
Yeah, to get everything even, yeah. So just sort of, yeah, pump, yeah, a recirculating mash, as Finn was saying, I don't know if you caught that. But yeah, sometimes you just got to wing it and don't fret too much if you're a little bit either side of the optimal range.
So I'm getting the same reading from two separate thermometers, so I trust it. But it is worth noting, don't always trust your equipment, as I'm sure Joel was probably just telling you. Trust it to a point, but if something doesn't seem quite right, if something's not adding up, don't always assume that your equipment's right and you're wrong. Especially if you've been brewing for a little while as well, you start to sort of get a bit of an intuitive feel for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you'll sense more when things are kind of a little bit different, a little bit off.
We have someone tuning in from the UK too.
Oh, awesome. Whereabouts?
Cheshire, maybe?
Okay.
Cheshire, I'm sorry, I probably pronounced that completely wrong. Cheshire?
Like the cat.
Help me out. Cheshire, yeah. Cheshire. Now I can't, now I've got the word stuck in my head and it's...
I can probably turn this off for a sec. But this is another half-hour rest as well, so. So we say we started this at 10 past roughly.
Yeah, right.
Maybe because we jumped the gun a little bit, so I reckon by the time we got this liquid in there and dumped stuff in here, we said 10 past. So at 22. Oh, it is crawling. I have to put a lot of water in here to get to the temp. We're currently sitting at 69 degrees.
It just won't budge.
Yeah, I'm putting in 90
keep putting
degree water in here.
This feels very familiar to me. I've had this experience before.
So we've put in, like, at this stage, about 5 litres of 90 degree water.
Just won't budge.
But this is the experience of this type of brewing.
Yeah.
And I think an important thing to notice is that myself and Joel, there's no panic in our voices.
Yeah.
When I did my first decoction and this stuff was happening, I cannot say the same.
Yeah, once
there was
upon
a lot of panic, there was a lot of stress,
yeah.
there was hands thrown in the air.
Yeah.
I disappeared for an hour to play PlayStation to calm down before coming back to it. Like, I think the key to when things are not going how you expected, or if things are sort of not doing what it said that would do on the website or in the article you read, the key is just to stay calm and think, well, what's the thing that I can do to remedy that? What's something that I can do to adjust things or change things or make them the way that I need them to be? And that's what we're doing. Just add more hot water. Keep adding until you hit your temp. And luckily we're at a point in the mash where it doesn't matter. If this had happened early on, it would have been more of a problem because basically it needed to be that thick in order for this to be the consistency and everything that we wanted. This is looking more promising. Was, and then it slows right down to a crawl again. 68.
And we did just have a question from Plug Papa. You will be we will be posting the recipe.
Yep, absolutely.
Online as soon as we can. With I assume you got. I think it's all handwritten at the moment, so that's why we.
The recipe was literally only handwritten because we've had all of our servers and computers updated recently, and all our copies of Beersmith have deactivated their licenses. So while we're getting that fixed, I had to kind of go old school, pen and paper, and make my calculations that way. 69 degrees, far out. Oh well, we're adding about a degree a litre at this point of 9 degrees. So I'm going to maybe add 2 litres in and see what that does.
You'd almost want to pull it off at that point and then just boil it up separately.
We're down to about 15 litres in the Braumeister.
Cheshire is near Manchester.
Oh, okay, cool.
By the way, how's my accent?
There's a YouTuber who I follow called GeoWizard, and they play a game called GeoGuessr, whereby you basically get put in a random location on like Google Maps, Google Images,
Okay.
and you have to try to figure out as close as you can where you are in the world.
Oh.
And he's really good at it, but he's a British guy as well, and he does a lot of UK only challenges. So I'm starting to learn my British geography slightly better.
Yes, yep.
His partner actually made it, like, let him play in real life, so drove him blindfolded to various random spots around the UK, Wales and
Oh, really?
Ireland, and then took the blindfold off and left him there, and he had to figure out where he was,
Where are you?
which was pretty cool.
So, yeah, my accent's always. If I try and do an accent, it always somehow becomes Indian at some point. So I tend not to do it.
That's probably not
But,
too far off from Manchester.
Yeah, that's sort of how Manchester. That's how I kind of. But yes, thank you, Cheshire Homebrew. So it's towards midnight there. You said not bad accent, but not quite Liam Gallagher. Gallagher, sorry.
There's been a few good musos out of Manchester though. Wasn't Joy Division out of there as well?
I want to say yes. I want to say it was some of the Beatles come from there as well. It was
Beatles Liverpool.
Liverpool, of course. Okay.
A few good musos out of Liverpool as well. Sabbath. And I feel like Manchester had a few, maybe even the Specials. I don't know. Oh, Specials were Coventry, I think. I just got cancelled by the Ska community for not knowing where the Specials were from.
Manchester.
Give me a break, guys. My hen turned out to be a rooster this morning and was crowing at an ungodly hour, so my sleep is not quite where it is. This is still 69 degrees. This is not moving at all. This is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Do I put more in, or do we just call it at 69.70?
Yeah, you might have to just call it, hey? But yeah,
Otherwise, I'm just going to keep adding and adding and adding and adding and getting nowhere. I'm just going to call that. We'll leave that and put the lid on like that, I think. Because if I put the edges over the sides, that might just leak up grains everywhere. There's enough liquid in the bucket now that that's a concern. What are we looking at over here?
Joy Division, Salford, Macclesfield, Greater Manchester. Yeah, all right.
Oh, so I wasn't too far off. That's good.
I'm glad that we're getting some music trivia answers in the chat.
My brain is full of useless information, but most of it, annoyingly, isn't the relevant parts to be good at, like pub trivia. It's like I'll know like a bunch of random facts about a band, but nothing to do with dates and times and places.
Sure, yeah.
Which is what the questions are always about. Cool. So, why turbid mashing? Why do people do this to themselves? Why so much grain and so little liquid?
Actually, before you jump into that thought, I'm just going to restart the camera. Good.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, it's good to go.
Good to go?
Yep.
Awesome. So, funnily enough, and I do try to do this with all the different style specific brews that I do, if possible. So when we did obviously like rye IPA or Belgian IPA, like some of those more modern styles, there's not a lot of history to really go into there, but styles that do have a kind of a story attached to how they came to be. I think it's good to learn the history and why sort of things turn out the way they do.
A bit of context.
Helps to understand the way things are, and I like to base most of my worldview on history and on historical context. So I think it's a good thing to apply that to beer as well. So there are a few different things which influence. I'm kind of going to just be quoting the the spiel I wrote on the event, but that works. There's a few different things that tend to influence beer styles. Water source is a classic one. So most people kind of know that in Dublin, for example, when they tried to make the pale ales that were really popular in London, they came out tasting pretty crappy. And when they started adding decent amounts of roasted malt into the recipe, the beers became significantly better. So that we now know that was to do with the quality of the water that they were using. Had a lot of carbonate in it, which has a pH buffering effect, which was meaning that in those paler beers, the mash pH was way too high for a tasty beer and was making it soapy, alkaline, tannic, astringent. And the addition of those roasted malts has an acidifying effect on the mash, which was pulling that pH back down into a good range for making delicious beers, which is why stouts from Dublin were tasting so good. And then the inverse of that would be somewhere like Pilsen in Czechoslovakia, where they had such soft water that they were able to have extremely pale beers that still came out tasting great. So yeah, water is a big one, and probably the biggest, I would say, in terms of, I guess, for lack of a better term, primitive style development. So when we're sort of talking why certain regions tended to brew in certain ways initially. But another really massive one, which I think would be pretty close to on par with that, would be economics. How can we do things as cheap as possible and as big as possible? So England is a classic example of that. So many different English brewing techniques stem from the need to make as much beer from as little labour as possible. So things like Partagar brewing, knocking out 3 or 4 different beers from the same mash, getting it all knocked out in one brew day meant that you weren't having to pay as much wages to produce multiple different products. And in the case of Lambics, it is taxes. And yeah, tax plays quite a significant role in a lot of the development of a lot of styles of beer. Because alcohol tends to get taxed in a fairly erratic and seemingly nonsensical manner. Various different legislators, for various different reasons, usually trying to moralize things or deal with like the moral catastrophe that is drunkenness and debauchery in society, and tax is a way that a lot of them try to approach dealing with that. We can't have the commoners having too much fun and spilling out onto the streets and making me feel uncomfortable in my carriage.
One of the functions of tax, yes, for sure.
And the way that Belgium, at a particular point in history, decided that it was going to apply tax to beer production was, rather than basing it on alcohol percentage, which was quite common, or in England, tax was based on the gravity. Oh, okay. We're gonna have to swap battery in a second.
Sorry to cut you off there, Ben. We'll come right back. I just got to change the panel on the battery before it cuts out.
3 seconds.
Yeah, it won't be long.
Very quick.
back.
We're back on? Awesome. I'm just down here keeping an eye on this, keeping it at temp. It had dropped down a little bit. I'm not too worried. I might even just let that boil now, to be honest. Doesn't really matter. It's all going to be boiled in a sec anyway. So where were we? We were in England. So if you guys managed to catch my stream on IPA, we talked specifically about the English tax laws around the gravity of the wort going into the kettle was how, for whatever reason, they decided
They tax that part.
to tax beer, which just seems bizarre to me. And in Belgium, at a particular point in time, they said, nope, it's the size of your mash tun. So the total potential volume of your mash tun is how much we're going to tax you for the beer that you produce. So as you can probably imagine, there was a very overnight quick scramble to figure out how on earth they could get the most possible beer out of the smallest possible mash tun. They still wanted to produce the beers, but they didn't want to have to pay the extra tax. At this point, you guys are probably starting to put two and two together as to why we were mashing in at 600 mils per kilo of grain at the start of this, this crazy process. So basically, the thickest mashes they could manage, and I'm doing things a little bit differently. I'm using a bag, but the traditional way that turbid mashing is done is with, I might even have it written down here, but with a word I can't pronounce, stoikmanden, which is some freaky deaky Dutch word, which basically means a stiff sieve that they can push down into the mash and let the water
as you walk past.
Kind of soak up through the sieve into the stoikmanden, which they can then scoop out or pump out or do whatever they're doing to get it out of the stoikmanden and into the little kettle for boiling.
They bought the boiler or whatever.
And they would obviously repeat that process. So every bit of water they pulled out, they replaced with more water to get to the next temperature, so on and so forth, and get their mash achieved that way.
So basically, and then so they could reduce the size of their mash tuns
by a significant
amount. And then they had their stoikmans.
Yes,
stoikmanden. Stoikmanden, and boilers, which weren't classed as mash tuns. So yeah, get around the tax. Clever.
And I apologise to any Dutch folk that might be in the chat as well. When I said freaky deaky Dutch, my wife is Dutch, so I'm allowed to use anti-Dutch slurs.
You have, yeah, fair enough.
I don't think that's really a slur.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically it's, and it's probably Flemish as well, right? Like being Belgian. But Flemish is basically like French Dutch, right?
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person. Oh yeah, I don't know exactly
the
the etymology of Flemish.
The lines and boundaries that define various different states and territories and kingdoms and fiefdoms and stuff.
Is it
have hardly been static over the last however many thousand years. So what was Holland at one point becomes Belgium, becomes Austria, becomes the kingdom of such and such or other.
Yeah.
It all gets rather confusing.
And modern day, I'm going to probably get this wrong too, I believe it's the south of Belgium speak mostly Flemish.
Yeah,
and the north speak mostly Dutch.
That sounds right, I think.
But I could have that.
Like a lot of Belgium speaks French, I think.
And yeah, and I guess as you go further south,
is kind of closer to Dutch.
You'd be more French.
Then there's Dutch, which
okay.
Even closer again to Dutch, I think.
So I
apologise again to any people from these parts of the world who are going, how dare you? How very dare you? But,
got that wrong.
Yeah. But I mean, Belgium in particular, like in the last 100 years or so, has undergone a fairly dynamic period of shifting boundaries and such. A couple of world wars and a whole bunch of turbulence that they kind of found themselves right smack bang in the middle of. But even before that, I mean, you look at the Napoleonic times and a lot of upheaval, a lot of craziness. But luckily now we're at a time in history where we just ship all that upheaval off to other parts of the world and sort out our differences. Sort out our differences there.
So, so tax. So that, I mean, and that's the story basically, is it?
Yeah. So
okay.
So like all this challenge and all these extra hours was obviously enough to save them money on tax, so they could pay a brewer to work an extra 5 hours and go
offset.
insane with
I wonder, you know, all the extra equipment that would have been required.
Was worth
and
it.
Space as well.
Worth
You're
it to save the money on the tax.
But it must have been enough, to avoid the tax. And of course, from that, they created this amazing style of beer as well.
Well, that's exactly right. So a lot of Belgian beer styles have interesting yeast or microbial cultures involved in the production of them. So you've got all the farmhouse styles, which, I mean, like even a saison, like it's not just a straightforward fermentation. Like there's funky things going on with saison yeast. So this type of brewing kind of lends itself well to a lot of different styles of beer, not just Lambic, but particularly Lambic and mixed culture fermentations. But one thing which is really interesting is if you were wanting to do a low alcohol beer that still had a considerable body, mouthfeel and flavour, this type of mashing regime would leave a lot of unfermentables in the wort, which would add to that perception of fullness and richness. So if you just used a regular yeast, say you wanted to do a 2 or 3% pale ale or something like that, doing a turbid mash with a normal grist for a pale ale could knock a fair bit of alcohol percentage off your total while still giving
you a lot of body at the end.
Or even doing a smaller grist, like doing a significantly less grain in your beer, but this type of mashing regime can give the perception of fullness and flavour. Stuff like a wit beer, this would be really good at as well.
Yeah.
Be nice and cloudy and again complex and interesting.
So I'm not sure. I think your flame may have gone out there.
Oh, has it? Oh yeah, probably just out of gas.
Out of gas.
So I'll pop yeah, definitely out of gas. I'll pop another canister in. I won't really need to run it for much longer. Because we are approaching the end of the mash. And then I have to figure out what to do next. Like I said, I know in theory what I'd like to do, but the practical application of that theory may lend me to changing plans on the fly.
So were they making Lambic before this process?
I don't know.
Do you know?
I'm not sure.
My knowledge of the history is a little thin to that end.
Or
whether they were already making Lambic and then this just sort of...
The thing with mixed culture beers and mixed fermentation beers is that they were the norm for a very long time.
Yeah.
And the kind of traditional brewing practices of various different regions would have lent themselves to certain approaches. So I think because Belgium was so influenced by French winemaking culture, there was a lot of barrel aging, there was a lot of sort of open fermentations and those kinds of things that come along with the French winemaking tradition. So I think it makes sense that there would be mixed culture.
Yeah, and blending and that sort of stuff going on barrels.
Weird, funky things going on with those beers. Whereas you look at somewhere like Germany, they have got quite a cold climate, and the practices that sort of built up over time were sort of built around that. They had the caves for low temperature lagering, and
so it really lent itself
the
to
yeasts
lagers.
that kind of evolved were better at dealing with those lower temperatures, which bacteria and things aren't. So that would have automatically kind of selectively chosen cleaner yeasts, I guess. Your lactobacillus isn't going to be too happy in a 10 degree ferment. It likes it up around 35. So there's probably a whole bunch of different factors that came into play there in terms of how these styles
came to be, eventually
developed,
settled.
yeah. But I definitely think that you look at brewing over a 10,000 year period, it's only really been the last 1,000 or 2,000 years that we've had kind of the level of, or even less, like I'd say like in hundreds of years that we've had the level of control over
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Yep.
over the types of microbes that are fermenting our beers. I mean, like germ theory is maybe what, 150 years old now? 150, 200 years. So like,
and well, before
that, yeast was just a thing that we kind of roughly knew about, but didn't know what it was, what it did.
Before the microscope was invented,
Louis Pasteur
really
literally discovered bacteria trying to figure out what made beer go bad. Like that's germ theory exists because of beer.
Because of beer.
It was like, well, this beer has gone sour and this beer hasn't. Oh, there's all these long rod-shaped things in the sour beer, but the not sour beer just has these nice circular things with little buds on them. I'm like, so this is yeast and this is lactobacillus.
Yeah.
It's our understanding of these things was very, very basic up until that happened, and then it sort of exploded out from there. I feel like I should have. I've been so focused on the practical application of the technique this week that I probably haven't Googled enough history of the
That's all right. I mean,
development of Lambic, other than the development of the technique. But I mean, a lot of those old breweries in Belgium are fairly old, though, aren't they?
Yeah, that's why I was thinking that when the tax laws that were introduced, do you have that on?
I mean, that was like 1800s.
1800s, okay.
Yeah.
So you would think these kinds of beers will probably be made before that. But again, being a sour beer fan myself, I should know this too. So I should know all this.
Here's me saying before, like how much I like history and learning about historical context was like, oh no, I'm just going to learn this one little. But yeah, it's fascinating. Like that this crazy process sort of came out of that, and we're doing it on a really small scale, but like we're talking about thousands of litres of beer being produced still in this fashion at places like Cantillon and Boone and Tilquin.
Yep. So this goes to show that the running theme through a lot of your style school shows is styles, and we've said this a lot, and I'm sure you'll continue to say it, we will continue to say it, styles are really born out of the region, very specific to the region that they were developed in, ingredients, but also political factors like tax.
It's all sort of comes down to the people. Like with everything, like historically, like I think a lot of history is sort of taught from the perspective of kings and generals and things like that, but ultimately, like what drives history forward is the lived experiences of the people at the time. So it's the brewer who has to pay a higher level of tax, so they change the entire way that they approach brewing beer, and different styles spring out of that.
It's something entirely new springs out of it. Yep.
Like this leader gets elected, but why did that leader get elected? Because all these people were like going through these things that led to them wanting to elect that leader or that general, or like it all sort of comes down to like all the people like who are sort of getting, having to live through these things, living through these different
being in it,
moments, and how they react and how they respond to it. That different cultural phenomena develop out of it. So
yeah,
I'm going to turn that
certainly no
down
exception.
a little because we're boiling. What is the time?
10:55.
Oh, we've shot past the 22.
Yeah, we did. Okay, we were waffling
That's all
on,
good.
I suppose.
All right, let's figure it out. Easy to get lost in the telling. So, my understanding of what needs to happen here is that the turbid stuff goes into here and mixes with the grains. Whew. Hey, look at that. Didn't cook anything on the bottom of the pan. That's a plus. I was worried I would do that. And then we give it a good mixy. Now getting that into there is going to be a challenge. I should have thought of that earlier. I was struggling to find surfaces to brew on, to be honest. What we could do actually, I'm going to move this off here, and I might get Joel to give me a hand with this, because this only has about 25, 20, 15, about 12 or 13 litres in it now, so it's not too heavy. We can easily move that onto this white table, which is quite sturdy. I'll move this into the sink. I'll move this across to here. And I will move this out of sight and out of mind. Maybe here. No, I'll knock it off.
Yeah. On the floor, oh yeah.
I might not even need a hand actually.
So
Isn't particularly
yeah. Let me know.
Actually, yeah.
Yep, that's an affirmative. Okay, ready?
I'm using the Brewmaster Plus today, which has a few extra kilos on it because of the awesome cooling jacket and a few other rad little features.
A lot of stainless.
Every kilo added is a kilo of good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to mix this up.
So it's quite a thin mash, you would call that at this point.
At this point, once I added that turbid stuff back in, it
A lot
definitely
of water
is.
to grain.
I still don't know if I'd necessarily say it is as thin as, say, a brew in a bag mash would be, though.
Oh yeah, okay, sure, yeah.
I still think it would be less than that.
Yep. Yeah, do you need another hand, or you're just trying to work out how to do it?
Pondering the strategy. I think if I lift this out, sit it over there, let it drain until it's not really draining much.
Oh yeah.
I've got another bucket here, which isn't clean enough to use as a mash tun, but I think is clean enough that I can probably dump the bag with the grains into it. And then I can pour that, which I very meticulously cleaned with sodium percarbonate and then scrubbed before we started today. I can pour the liquid from there into there, and then away we go.
All right.
And I can also set this, before I do any of that, I'm going to set the Brewmaster to boil so that it is heating. Sorry, I just walked through everything. So it's heating while we do all this, so we're not wasting time.
Yep.
All right. Whew. Wish me luck.
Good luck.
This is going to get messy. I can already see it. The other thing is this is a lot hotter now, so squeezing it is going to be... I'm going to go grab my gloves now, get ahead of the game. So we're going to be in the 80s of degrees now, and that is a little bit over my
Pain threshold.
Yeah. I've got the left-hand glove. Will I live to regret it? Possibly. All right. Oh man. No, it's all good.
All good? You want to hammer? Oh yeah.
Trying to spill as little as possible in that transfer. One other good thing about the brow, which I've not realised because I've never done this before. Usually if I'm using a Brewmeister, I have no need for a brew in a bag, but for what I would imagine would be obvious reasons. But
Yep.
it's a wider mouth than the urns I normally use.
Okay.
So the bag kind of spreads out a little bit nicer. So right now I am squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, trying to get as much juice out of that bag as I can, because the juice is the good stuff. I should have got the other glove actually, because I want to squeeze this side.
You want me to grab
that's all
second
good.
glove for you?
Just got to be careful not to kick the plug out.
Oh yeah.
But we've basically done it, guys. We've done a turbid mash, a full turbid mash, not skipping a single step. Which I thought I might have to, but
Yeah, I remember I did a mash, I think I was telling you before the show, in a single vessel in my Brewmeister, and it was I don't know, I think it was like a 12-hour brew day at the end of it. Most of it was the boil, because I
am skipping the the 3-hour boil.
The 3-hour boil, yeah. But, you know, for anyone, I guess, who has a single vessel brewing system, you know, it can be done. I worked out a bit of a workaround. I don't think it was quite as effective or is correct, because you're starting with a lot more liquid than you would normally in a Brewmeister, and I think the other types of brewing systems, robo brews and such, there's a minimum amount of water that it will let you have at the beginning, otherwise the pumps won't work. So you're starting out with more water than you is what is ideal for a turbid mash.
I think what we've also proved today, though, is that regardless of what system you're brewing with at home, you can definitely achieve this.
Yeah, I think your system, like a couple of buckets and a bag, is definitely the way to go.
Like, assuming
You know, you can just use the inside burner.
that whatever system you're brewing on, you have a kettle. That has ended up almost exactly on the 25 litre mark, which is exactly where I wanted to end
That's
up.
your target. All right.
So I don't need to get any more out of that bag, which is good. I do need to clean this table. Made a little bit of a mess. So I'll show you the inside of this bucket. It is starchy and a little grimy and a little weird, which
I don't know if you can make that out, people,
what we
but yeah. It's a bit out of focus here. Yeah, so there's a ring of stuff in the bottom.
But yeah, I really do think that we've shown that anyone who's brewing beer or grain at home will have a kettle.
Yep.
With the capacity to hold as much water as is needed for them to brew. All you need then is, because I mean, I would absolutely just use a stock pot like I did today on a stove, like the stove in your kitchen.
Yep.
For boiling your turbid pull off. And I've just used a bucket with a brew in a bag as my mash tun. But if you've got a 3-vessel system, you've already got a mash tun. Use that.
Yep.
Pull it, and you can then even like pull it off the bottom, and you can possibly squeeze the grains from on top. Run it off that way. Like there's a ton of different ways. But I really found the brew in a bag way was really easy, which I guess you guys would have seen too. Instead of having to push something down and scoop it up,
Yeah.
just squeeze the bag, get the juice out of it that way.
I was thinking as you were doing it, the traditional the mash tun, people using eskies and such.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's how it would have been done before brew in a bag was invented, but brew in a bag definitely has some advantages over that, I think, in this process.
I'm really happy with, with how that turned out. I'm genuinely stoked right now. Like we've managed to somehow simplify and achieve something that I thought was going to be a lot harder to do. So that's cool. And it also means that all you guys now, if you wanted to, can do this. It's really simple. Not really simple, I shouldn't say that.
It's achievable. It is really achievable.
There's definitely a bit of work that goes into knowing sort of ratios and things like that, but it's 2 grains.
Yeah.
40% some kind of unmalted wheat, 60% some kind of not unmalted barley. And then just start with the water to grain ratio that everyone says, which is, they always say in quarts to pounds, which is annoying, but
we will provide links as well. The
600 mils per litre, 600 mils per kilo is the starting ratio for mashing in. And then it's just a matter of having your kettle with as much water as you need for the brew at 90 degrees. And adding enough of that 90-degree water each time to hit the next temperature rest. If you do that, you're golden.
So you need some kind of vessel to hold your water at 90 degrees. I guess if you just got a big pot at the very minimum, you can just keep that on a low heat on a burner or something. But an electric vessel system, an electric system will probably give you a bit more consistency. Yeah. Well, okay, an induction cooker. Yeah.
And then separate page I'll tell you just to make sure you always have that sponge water like the brown rice, so that's excellently.
Yep. Simple.
You onto the boil now?
Getting there.
Cool.
On its way. It is 82.5 degrees, way up to 100. So the other thing I would say is that we haven't cheated yet, but we're about to cheat. So as Joel said, it's a 2 or 3 hour boil generally, and it is also, the guys on Milk the Funk would probably want to lynch me for pitching the Lambic blend into it.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, sure. Fermentation is a whole other show almost too. You could.
It really is the key to the style. Like, all this stuff is really fun and it is important, but it's the fermentation. We do this to aid the fermentation.
Yeah, this is all in support of the fermentation. Yeah.
And I guess the more kind of recognized and respected way to achieve proper lambic is with something called a cool ship. Mm-hmm. So what that basically is the shallow trough that once the beer has been boiled, it's run into that trough and it cools open to the air. So Steve, who works here, the way he achieved it was using like fly screen.
Yeah.
Like a fly screen door over the top of his cool ship. So it kept bugs and stuff out. It was like a tight mesh.
Yeah.
But allowed like the native sort of yeasts and things that were in the atmosphere to settle down into the beer.
And he used a stainless steel table or something, was it? Yeah, and he just run it down that. So you need just something that has a large surface area. As we were saying earlier with Cantillon, opening up their louvers and the spider webs and such, that all happens over their cool ship, which is a big old. I assume they still use it. They might have a more updated version nowadays, but
never in my life have I managed to get through a brew day without splashing water all over myself. Luckily, I managed to avoid the microphone though, so that's good. So yeah, so realistically, the idea is you're using the wild native yeasts to wherever you're brewing and getting that terroir into the beer. Another sort of probably considered more valid way of doing things is collecting bottle dregs. So different beers that are in the Lambic style, which have yeast like in the bottles, so they're still active when they're bottled, and people collect the dregs from the bottom of the bottles, culture them up, and then add those into their wort to kickstart the fermentation that way. That's also a really common way of developing sort of your own culture from a mixture of other people's cultures.
Yeah, you can kind of customise. It's a lot of fun. The process is similar to making a mini starter. So if anyone doesn't know what a starter is or wants to learn how, we did a video on that just the other week. So just search our YouTube channel for yeast fundamentals, and I'll be uploading some highlights of that.
Yeah, the production on that stream was really good too. That was...
Yeah, we hats off to the producer of that
probably
stream.
Probably my favourite back end.
We got in some really good talent that day who working behind the camera. But yeah, so if you know how to make a starter, you can cultivate beer dregs from your favourite sour beer styles and add them to your wort, and yeah, get something really cool.
So then I guess the third way, the cheats way, which is how I'm going to be doing it, is you can actually buy pre-cultured, sort of blended cultures from brands like White Labs, Y-Yeast, all sorts of different manufacturers will have their own kind of variations of it. But the Y-Yeast one is the 3274, I think, Lambic blend, 3278.
I'm really bad with the numbers.
I'm pretty sure it's 3278. It's the Lambic blend.
Lambic blend, okay.
And it's unofficially the Cantillon blend.
Yeah, right.
Which they've cultured up. White Labs has a few interesting ones actually. They've got Belgian Sour Mix 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, White Labs
and a couple of other blends as well that they do.
Yeast Bay, if you're lucky enough to get any of their stuff at the moment. I don't know that we've got a lot in Australia.
We've got a couple
at the moment, but yeah, if you can find, they do lots of interesting.
And you can even grab a few of those and dump them all in as well.
Yeah, mix them
and again, you're sort of getting your own blend going. Another thing, which is I think big with Lambics, is the oak side of things.
Yes.
So Lambics are traditionally oak aged in big barrels. And those barrels are imparting a lot of those cultures and a lot of those funky characters into the beer through previous fermentations. In order to achieve... cool. In order to achieve an oak character, a lot of people will use chips or staves. And that can actually be a really fun way to impart some different bacteria in as well. So you can take those staves and soak them in Lambic of different brands that you like and let them kind of get inoculated with those cultures and throw those staves into the beer along with your sort of more beefy kind of blend.
Yep.
And then that can introduce some interesting funky things as well.
And then you can take those staves from one batch and put them in another, just the oak. And that will...
And over time that will develop into its own culture and its own thing that you're inoculating your wort with. Because that is something that I think most people that brew Lambics, the dream is always to make the Gers, the homemade Gers, which is a blend of Lambics. I mentioned it at the start of the stream, 1, 2 and 3 year old Lambics. So if you set aside a day each year as Lambic Day, and you brew a new batch of Lambic each year, and kind of keep them in, I don't know, demijohns or some kind of container which they'll age well in with the oak. And after you've been doing it for a few years, you can start to make blends from those batches, and that's kind of a cool thing as well.
That was definitely my goal at one point. I unfortunately my life wasn't conducive to having large vessels of beer just sitting around for a period of time. But yeah, that's.
That's
I did have a couple of
tricky thing, I
demijohns.
guess. Not everyone can have a barrel room at home.
If you're lucky enough to have a cellar or some storage space or something where you can keep these things, Yeah, glass demijohns are great. I mean, in Australia, they're probably the main thing we have access to now for this kind of aging. Once upon a time, the better bottles would have been perfect as well. The plastic, they're like a water tower kind of thing, but we no longer have those. So yeah, demijohns offer a good, reasonably good value storage container.
And if you are doing it every year as well, then like Joel was saying, you can take those sticks of oak that you've had in your first lambic and dump them into your next batch of wort, and that's going to help inoculate. And over time, those sticks of oak will become like the magic yeast sticks that the old druids used to have, where the beer, there was nothing magical about the beer until the druid came in with his magic stick and stirred it, and then somehow it started bubbling and fizzing and just came to life and was a magic elixir. And those sticks can be your little magic sticks that are
magic sticks,
bringing life to your lambic wort each year. So that, I think there's something kind of romantic and awesome about that as well.
Yep. And you can each batch maybe add a different, some commercial bugs or a different. Finn just said he's doing that himself. So yeah, just increase the complexity over time and just transfer those oak staves. I'll just pop up on camera there so I'm not a random voice. And that, just an extra bit of fun thing you can do.
You want to get like some extra level out of the oak staves, you could like soak them in a nice wine.
Yeah, sure. That's another thing you can do too. Yeah.
It's pretty much limitless. It's and it really is the joy of making things at home, is that you can do all these kinds of wild, crazy things. Anything that you can imagine, you can kind of do, as long as you can figure out a way to achieve what you're imagining. And I think the longer you do it, the more adept you get at coming up with ways to overcome limitations.
The more comfortable you become with...
You understand the mechanics of what's going on a little bit more and how to manipulate those. And that's really where it becomes a little bit easier to achieve the things that you're wanting to achieve. This is the weirdest looking kettle of wort I've seen. I'm like so distractible. I'm like going, it looks gross, but I'm sure it's delicious. I should say as well, actually, I mentioned earlier that I did 60% Pilsner malt and 40% torrefied wheat, but I did sub out about 150 grams of that Pilsner malt with a sigillated malt because being that both of these grains were quite pale, I did want to adjust the pH down into a suitable level. And with a lambic, you really want even lower than your normal sort of pH, ideally. Particularly if you're doing a cool ship thing, the sort of recommendation with that kind of thing is that you would probably make an acid addition of some kind to your mash at the end of the mash or in the boil to knock it down to, is it
about 4.5?
4.5?
Yeah, it's about 4.5 or under, 4.2 to 4.5, sort of that range.
Basically helping it to fight off any potential pathogens that might get in there and actually actively harm people. Most of those have a pH tolerance of up to and above sort of 4.6, 4.7. Once you drop below that to sort of 4.5 or under, the types of things that are going to be able to survive in that wort are going to be the ones you want inoculated in the wort. So, if you do go the cool ship path, which I think is really cool, that's why they call it a cool ship, because it's cool.
Not the rad ship, it's the cool ship.
Yeah. Then that is definitely something to keep in mind as well, and to be very mindful of, because you do not want to be poisoning yourself or your loved ones.
No, generally not. Ideally for the mash, you want to keep it in a mash range pH, just for the enzymes to keep them all happy. And then after the mash, you can dose it with a bit of
a little squirt of lactic acid,
lactic or phosphoric or something, just to get it down to 4.5. Or in the boil even. You can do it at the end of the boil, during the boil.
You'll probably find if you do it at the end of the mash, you'll get a slightly more accurate reading from your pH.
Yeah, true, because it's going to be boiling. The hotness of the wort can make the reading, throw out the reading.
Yeah.
hotness. That's a technical bit brewing term.
So we are approaching the boil now,
Cool.
which takes me to the final piece of the lambic puzzle. You've seen me reference this little brown envelope a few times over the course of the brew day. So, hops. Normally, I seriously feel like every single part of this brew day is just the exact opposite of what I would be trying to achieve for literally any other brew day. But normally, hops are something which we add into a beer to add bitterness, to protect it against infection, and to give a delicious flavour and aroma that pretty much everyone watching this, I'm guessing, is a big fan of. With lambics, some of those things are true. You will add a little bit of bitterness, but you don't want to add much. But you also will be adding a degree of antimicrobial action into your beer. But again, you don't want too much. There's a lot of bacteria that you're wanting to do things in your beer, so you don't want to just
It's a
make it
balance.
impossible for them to
You want
function.
the good bacteria, but not the bad bacteria, so to speak.
But you don't want flavour, you don't want aroma, you don't want much bitterness, and you don't want to go overboard with the antimicrobial stuff either. So why add them at all? That's a good question. A lot of folk don't now.
Excellent question, Ben.
If you are doing if you're doing a cool ship, I think it's more important to add a little bit of what I'm about to add. But if you're not, if you're doing what I'm doing no chill today, or if you're chilling and running straight into a fermenter with your yeast, I don't think you need to worry about adding these. I did it because I think it's kind of a cool thing. And it is, again, a traditional thing. So I kind of wanted to give the full lambic experience, I guess.
Yep.
Minus the cool shit. And the 3-hour boil. But basically, they use aged hops.
What?
Yeah. So normally, we try to keep our hops out of the oxygen in a cool environment to preserve all the things we love about them, the flavor, the aroma, the character, the bittering compounds, all those things. We want them to be as present as they possibly can be in the hops that we use. In a lambic, you don't want most of those things. So
ironically,
leaving hops in an unsealed, breathable environment over a period of time allows you to achieve that. So I'm going to come up close to the camera and I'll show you. So I managed to find, this was very last minute, and these hops probably haven't been quite aged as much as they normally would. But Matt managed to find some Styrian Goldings cones.
Oh, really?
That were from 2016. So it's actually a really good choice of hop to use as well. Initially I had some Galaxy because that was all we had, and I was like, this is not going to be appropriate for a lambic, but
And they're
Styrian
actual
Goldings are great
too. Are they homegrown ones, or are they?
I don't know. Matt just said these are Styrian Goldings. I'm like, okay, cool, perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I took them home, put them in the oven, lowest temperature I had, cooked them for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. Blasted the last remnants of my old benzomatic oxygen bottle into the bag as well.
So really, really, like literally oxygen.
And then I've just left this open in my shed because I didn't want my dog or cat to get them,
not good for pets.
hops and pets don't mix.
But we'll have noticed that they take on a brown,
And these are still honestly too greeny yellow for my liking. I would have liked them to go a lot browner. And I'm not going to put much in. I'm going to put like half a handful in just for the sake of having them in there. I'm going to try to pick the brownest hops that are in there as well. I'm not sure whether I should put in a hop sock or something. I think I might. Because one thing about flowers is they're really messy. And because the Braumeister has pumps and all those sorts of things, I don't want them getting sucked into holes and clogging up the works. So I'm going to use this little hop bag to add them in. I'll just give it a quick rinse.
And just a little tip for anyone who is planning ahead for making a beer like this, what I like to do is whenever I have any leftover English or German style hops or any noble hops from a recipe that I'm not planning to use, I'll just pop them in a bag and keep them in my fridge, and they just tend to sit there for a year or however long, and they just sort of age in there. I do keep the bag sealed because you don't want the smells of the fridge getting in there. And then sort of maybe if I'm planning a Lambic style brew, I'll pull them out. Usually I sort of plan a month ahead, so I'll pull them out and put them somewhere just in at room temperature, just to really get them crispy and aged up that way. So
I can't see the readout on the Brewmaster. 96 degrees.
Yeah.
Let's call that we've hit the boil. Because 96 is basically boiling. And that means we'll get to boil it for a little bit longer than we would have otherwise, which
okay.
won't quite be 2-3 hours, but... so one of the reasons for the 2-3 hour boil is to boil the flavour out of the hops. So what I could have done is if I had another little camping stove, I could have just had that water in that boiling these hops the whole time as well.
Oh, okay, just to further...
Which was something I thought about,
Yeah.
but I was already struggling to find enough surfaces to house all the things that I was using. But if you were doing it at home, that could be a really cool thing. Like if you're in the kitchen anyway with your turbid mash. And this would be a good collaboration brew as well with a mate or with a partner or something like that, like have a helper. So you can have somebody manning the stove and keeping an eye on the temperature of your turbid runoff and boiling the hops and keeping them topped up with water so it doesn't drop off. And then that could mean that you don't have to boil as long as the actual boil to get rid of the flavour of the hops too.
And you would just add all that liquid into your kettle at the end, yeah. Well, at the beginning of the boil.
So yeah, so that was on the cards in my plans for today, but I decided against it for practicality.
Sure. Space reasons.
Yeah. And also it was one extra thing to be looking at, which is a little
true, yeah.
I think we found the right balance today of things to be looking at. There we go, we got movement. The surface is rippling and moving, so we're boiling. In go the hops. And I put in half a handful, like not much. I don't need much anyway, because I'm using I'm using the no chill method and I'm using like a sort of cultured pitch. This was more just like, we're doing Lambic, we kind of got to do the aged hops thing. Or at least as close an approximation of it as we can manage. So that's what we've done. And yeah, we'll just keep that going for now. When we get to the end, I'll cube it as we normally do. Throw it into the cube while it's still boiling after a brief whirlpool. I don't think I will do a fining edition because I want everything.
Yeah, sure.
So
you want all that gunk.
Any cloudiness, any weirdness is going to be chewed up by the bugs.
Yep.
So
that'll be food for the bacteria.
I'm not worried about finding it all out and getting a nice little mound. It's just once I feel like it's time to cube it, I'll cube it, and away we go. We'll ferment that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking possibly, I know cherries have just come in season, so I'm out in the far western suburbs, and I know Bacchus Marsh has a bunch of farms you can go and grab cherries
okay, like
at a reasonable price.
Yeah, sure.
So I know they're not the proper sour cherries that you're meant to use for Lambic, but it might be kind of cool to chuck some Australian cherries.
Kind of an Australian creek.
Into the fermenter with the Lambic, because I think that's how you meant to do it, isn't it? Like it's in the initial fermentation, you put your fruit in.
Yeah, well, creeks, and just for anyone who's not aware of that word, a creek is a cherry lambic, basically. And yeah, I don't know when they had the fruit. Again, ashamed to say, being a sour beer fan, I should know. Steve would definitely know. He'd be the guy.
Steve.
Yeah.
So,
but whether they add them into the boil or I'm sure it's probably something
Steve is definitely the expert around grading grape. So if you're wanting to get into this style of beer, like I feel like I've learned a hell of a lot about it in the last couple of weeks. But if you want to talk to someone who lives and breathes it, Steve, who works here, is genuinely the king of Lambic knowledge, and has a disgustingly well-stocked Lambic cellar as well of amazing and incredible aged beers that generally tend to come up around sort of Christmas parties and things.
He's a Lambic fiend.
So definitely ask him.
And in Steve's absence, I mean, I can do my best, but
yeah. And Joel's the other sort of Lambic king around these parts.
Although I feel like I've forgotten more than I learnt, or ever knew.
Well, that's the nature of learning things about booze. Is that it's a medium that's not known for memory retention.
True, I guess so.
But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like everything from this point on is pretty standard. We're just going to boil boil this wort for, I don't know what time it is.
It's just 11:30.
11:30. So I'll boil it probably till just after 12:30, maybe 12:45. Give it a little bit of a longer boil than normal. Normally I'd only do a 60-minute boil for pretty much any style, but this, I guess, is a little bit different. So I'll boil it up as far as I can go, where I still think I'll be able to get everything cleaned up.
Yeah, you're in time. Yeah,
and into the cube, and everything else is going to be pretty straightforward. I probably will throw some oak in there as well.
Ah, okay. At the end, just a bit of extra.
So I think some oak flavour is.
Yeah, oak. Sorry, yeah. I thought you said oats.
yeah. Throw some oats in the fermenter with it. Yeah.
That's
who knows? It might do something.
My ears. I've heard of people using putting pasta in there to give. I don't know how if it actually worked or not, but yeah, to give the bugs extra starch to chew on.
That makes sense. Or just use the pasta water when you're cooking your spaghetti.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, that's pretty much what we made, wasn't it? Pasta water. It looked like.
Yeah, well, it really did. And I mean, like as somebody who has come around to liking pasta more and more recently, and part of that has been there's like a specific genre of YouTube videos which is like Italian people getting angry at people making pasta wrong and then telling them.
Oh, really? I have not. This is one of the few.
And since I've been watching those, like that genre, like I'm learning so much more about how pasta's meant to be and really coming around to it, because I think it's just, I'm just eating pasta like a non-Italian. And yeah, so adding the pasta water into the sauce is a crucial part of 90% of the sauces that I've seen.
Right.
So.
Angry Italians react to, is it?
Pretty much.
Cool. I'll have to look for that.
Like screaming at Gordon Ramsay for like calling whatever monstrosity carbonara. Recommend it.
Yeah, check it out. Cool. So we'll be posting, we'll try to get up some of the links that Ben was talking about that he looked at, some of the research. I have a couple of links too that I used back when I was really getting into this style of brewing that are a good read, just about turbid mash in general, how to sort of go about it. The calculations as well, which I guess Ben didn't go into a lot of detail about because of the time, but we'll put some links up about those. So if you're watching this later on down the track, you can
I'll also be writing. I've been working slowly back through all the demos I've done over the last few years, and knocking out articles about each of the styles that I've covered.
Cool.
And I'll be trying to get an article done about this within the next week or so.
Oh, cool. Well, that'll be.
So the ones that come right after the demos generally aren't quite as good quality as the other ones, because I'm sort of rushing to get them out in time for the next newsletter. The other ones I give a bit more time and thought into. And I apologise if there's errors in the recipes, because a few of them have gone out with minor errors that have just sort of accidentally been left in or things like that. But
we'll tweak those as we go. But yeah, we had a database. I don't know what happened. You lost all your recipes at one stage, didn't you? So you're having to rebuild them all.
I've even lost the new ones again now.
Yeah,
too,
because we just recently changed the server. Yeah,
but that's okay. So I'm rediscovering all these styles and figuring out how to brew them. So the recipes in the old ones may not be as good as the initial ones. Okay. But they'll still be good examples of the styles. Well, and good jumping off points.
Appreciate your patience with those. Eventually hope to we'll get maybe ahead of ourselves and be able to put the recipes up when we do our live streams. But at the moment we're just treading water. So thanks for your patience with all that, and to keep an eye on the website. And just the links in the description as well.
If you subscribe to our newsletter as well, all those articles that I was mentioning are coming out sort of as they're written in the newsletters too. So
that's a good way to keep up to date. We do post recipes in there.
And find out about any future sales and
yep,
things like
any sales or any goss that's happening. The newsletter is where you'll find all that. We just got a question from Craig.
Yep.
So he's asking, when using oak chips, do you use a hop sock to be able to easily remove the chips, or do you want optimal surface area interaction, so throw them in commando?
That is a really good question,
Yes.
and the answer is not a simple yes or no.
The answer is kind of do what you like, really, isn't it?
You do you.
You do you.
I personally prefer staves over chips.
Yep.
I use chips with wine, and the way that I do that is I'll put them in with, when I crush the grapes initially, I'll throw the chips in then, and then in a week or two's time when I press it, the oak's chips stay behind in the press, and none of them come through into the fermentation, like the storage vessels for the wine. So that's why I use chips with wine, because that way I get about the right amount of contact time with the chips, which kick off a lot of oak character in a really short period of time.
You get a lot of extraction from chips.
And it's an easy way to leave them behind, but with pretty much everything else I use staves. You get a lot more of a, and again, this isn't right or wrong, this is personal preference, but I think with staves, because it's not end grain wood, you get a much more rounded, much more sort of
mellow
oak character. With the chips, because it's end grain, it's really sharp and like it's oak instead of oak.
Yeah.
So I just prefer that, and I think it's easy to control as well. Like it's going to let the oak flavors out slowly over a longer period of time. So with the chips, it could be like a day difference ruins your thing, whereas with the staves, like if you don't taste it for a few weeks and then taste it, it's like, oh, I think that's about ready. It might have been ready 2 weeks ago, but it doesn't matter because you're not ripping heaps and heaps of stuff out of them really quickly.
That definitely echoes my experience using, I think I made an Irish red and I oaked it because why not? This is back when I was beginning home brewing, and I used chips and I put them in the fermenter for the standard 2 weeks of fermentation, and when I bottled it, it was just like an oak. You were sucking on a stump or something. It was too much, but it did mellow out eventually and became drinkable. But when making lambics, anything you want to age, I agree with Ben. Staves. The way to go, and you don't really need to use a bag in that case because you just chuck them in your demijohn. And they can sit there for a year. As well.
If you're aging this for a year, that's a long time for it to keep pulling stuff out of that wood.
Yes.
So put in less than you probably think you need, and then if after a while, and again, this is going to come from experience, and if you've done it a few times, you know roughly where you want to be at various times. But if after 6 months you're getting no oak and
you're not happy with it.
You can just chuck another stick in there. And I do that with slightly stronger things that I play around with as well. If I have say like a whiskey, for example, if I get my hands on some unoaked whiskey, which you can occasionally find around on your travels. And I've had some oak in there for a few months and the colour doesn't seem like it's developing and the smell doesn't seem like it's quite there. I can just stick another stick in there and see how that goes after another month or two, and if that's kind of what it needed to get to where it needed to be, then good. If not, then I'll throw another one in there, and you can kind of go by feel and use your senses to kind of judge. It's just a lot easier to not stuff up, I think.
With a lambic, you got it sitting there, demijohn. You don't want to mess with it too much, so every 4 to 6 months just pull a sample, give it a taste and see how it's progressing, and then you can just drop an extra stave in if you need it, taste it again 4 to 6 months. Is it where you want it to be? If not, chuck another stave in. I mean, you can age them for as long as you want. You know, a year sounds like a long time, but you do it 18 months, 24, 2 years. I mean, gee, I mean, it just depends on how much space you have and your commitment.
So I guess the flip side of that is chips, you'll get more tannins.
Yes, sure.
So if you're, like we mentioned tannins before and actually wanting them, that's why we were sparging with such hot water and all those things. The Brett and things that are in your Lambic blend are going to eat the tannins as well,
yep.
and produce some really interesting and tasty flavors from that specific chemical interaction. So you will get more tannins from chips than you will from staves. So there could be an argument made that maybe dumping in a bag, like a mesh bag full of chips for like a couple of weeks and pulling it back out again, could introduce some interesting things in there.
Okay.
I would keep in mind if you're putting it in and pulling it back out, you're going to be exposing it to oxygen, which is going to impact the way in which the different bacteria
All right. Okay, we're back. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there.
Sorry guys.
Sorry.
Minor technical gremlins. So I don't know where it cut off there, but I was basically saying one of the benefits of using oak chips might be that you introduce more tannins because the chips will impart more tannins into it. So getting a mesh bag with oak chips, putting it into the Lambic and then leaving it in there for a week or two, pulling it back out, that might get some of those tannins which some of the different bacteria in your blend will chew up and turn into specific interesting things. If you are opening your fermenter, putting things in, pulling them out, you're exposing it to oxygen. That's going to do two things. It's going to speed up formation of pellicles, and it will also favour certain bacteria within the blend, so like aerobic bacteria versus anaerobic bacteria. So Acetobacter is one of the main aerobic bacteria that will be in the mix in most of these types of beers, which is like what produces vinegar. And you do want a little bit of that in your beer, but if you are sort of repeatedly intervening and adding air into the mix, then the Acetobacter can kind of take off a little bit more and you can end up with an unbalanced amount of vinegary flavour in your end thing. So that's something worth considering, like trying to limit the exposure to air that
gets really noticeable too. A little bit, yeah. A little hint of vinegar the Acetobacter brings is quite nice, but there's a threshold. Once you hit it, it's just like, ooh, all you can taste is vinegar, and oxygen is your enemy there. So you want to keep a little bit of oxygen, good. Too much, bad. So don't open it. Yeah, be opening it up too much. As little as possible.
Leave it alone, guys.
Leave it alone. Hence every 4 to 6 months, even just every 6 months.
You'll go blind.
Yeah, stop playing with your beer. So I hope that answered your question, Craig. I mean, we may have waffled on a bit there, but I think,
that's what this is all about, right?
That's like what we're here for.
And that's why you edit the...
Yeah, that's why I edit later on. But yeah, oak it's something that you just have to play with yourself, I guess, and just find your own preferred method. But in general, staves are better than chips for long-term aging, keep as much oxygen out of your demijohn as you can. I think that is it. Unless anyone else has any questions.
Yeah, definitely feel free to ask.
From here, Ben, as we were saying, is just going to finish the boil and cube the beer as you would any other normal beer. Wort, I should say. I'm trying to make sure I use the correct terms.
I guess slightly differently because I'm not going to be adding finings and things into this one. I'm
right,
keep
no
it
finings.
just as unadulterated as I possibly can.
And you're just going to pitch the Rosalaire blend, the Lambic blend straight into primary and just let it do its thing from there. Is that the idea?
Yep. So I'll just grab one of those smack packs. I probably won't even do a starter with it. The thing with the bug blends like that is that if you do a starter, the conditions that you do the starter in are going to throw out the ratios of different bugs and yeasts and bacteria in there. So you don't, it's again, just do the opposite of what you would normally do at every single step of the way and Lambic. But you want to just pitch the pack as is, or potentially if you're doing a bigger batch, pitch more packs. So that you get all those ratios in the right amount. So the flavors come through kind of roughly balanced. And it's not going to be exact because even the conditions of your fermentation, the temperature of the year as it chugs along, how much oxygen you let in, all these things are going to drastically impact, like how much tannin extraction you achieve throughout your mash. Like all these little things are going to drastically impact the kind of microbiology of what's going on in there. Because all these different chemicals are getting eaten by one thing, which then produces a new chemical, which then another thing eats and produces a new chemical, which makes this thing come over and eat that. And it's this symbiotic, weird dance that happens that will start to smell and taste horrible, and then that horrible smell and taste will turn into something amazing, which will then turn into something slightly less horrible. And
it'll go through a ropey phase. Ropey, they call that's where the Pediococcus, I believe it's the souring bug that creates these sort of glutinous or gloopy strands in the wort. It looks kind of gross, but it just means it's doing its job. And then, when that clears up, it's at the end of the day, you'll end up with something pretty tasty. It's one of the reasons why I love this style and love making it. We just got a spill somewhere, I think, happened. Because you never know quite what you're going to get at the end of the day, at the end of the process. I think the chat's gone quiet. We're just going to watch Oscar filling up a
my bucket.
bucket there.
Yes.
What happened?
A bag with a beer in it dropped and it's gone.
Oh no!
It's gone everywhere.
So in the shop.
Tragic.
Absolutely, it's a saison de pont too.
Oh no!
It seems relatively relevant.
So someone dropped a saison de pont in the store. For those of you who haven't been near the shop before, behind Ben is where the actual shop is.
And we're open again.
And we are open again, yeah. So we're actually we're trading.
Four people
we
at a
have
time.
always been trading, but the door's open so people can come in.
4 people at a time at the moment, just for the safety of staff and customers. But
yes, yep. We're all masked up, of course, as you can see. We're continuing that
seriously.
Yep. And probably will do.
We would like to be able to stay open, and in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that things don't get out of hand again. So
definitely. Cool. Okay. Shall we call it there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Before everybody sees me like fishing my fingers into a pot of boiling sugary liquid to get a hot bag out and tighten it.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Classic OH&S tactics.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, as usual, if you want to stay up to date with any of the videos that we send out, hit the subscribe button. That way you'll always be notified when we upload new videos, which eventually we will plan to be doing. I know I keep saying this, but I'm working on highlight packages and just smaller clips that we'll start uploading in some kind of regular fashion. Probably won't be happening towards the end of the year, or even early next year. But if you subscribe, you'll never miss any of those videos. And check out the website for upcoming streams. That's where we keep our schedule. I'll put a link in the description below for that too. So, I hope you all learned something.
I did.
Yeah, had some fun watching Ben make a mess.
Yeah, never had occurred to me before today to brew a Lambic, and with the style school, what I used to do was there was a random style generator, and I'd just click generate. It would give me a style, and that's what I'd brew. And every time Lambic came up, I'd skip it.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's pushed me into doing something I wouldn't otherwise have done, and I've had a blast. I've really enjoyed myself today. So
cool.
I hope you guys enjoyed it too.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I hope so too. All right, awesome. All right, take